4,000 years ago, the Creator of the universe made an everlasting covenant with Abraham. All the land, from the Euphrates to the Nile, belongs to the sons of Israel. Shock waves will shake the earth as heaven reaches down to fulfill that promise.
The Gulf of Aqaba, or as it is called in the Hebrew Scriptures, the Yam Suf. This body of water covers an underwater gorge that is larger than the Grand Canyon. It was here, at the ancient seaport of Etzion Geber, near Eilat, that King Solomon built his navy yard. According to the Hebrew Scriptures, this is the same body of water, the Yam Suf, the Reed Sea, inaccurately translated Red Sea, that Moses parted when he led the children of Israel from Egypt to Mount Sinai over in the land of Midian. The entire Egyptian cavalry was destroyed as they attempted to pursue Moses through this very sea. Recently, a team of scientists using robotic submarine cameras filmed the coral-encrusted remains of Pharaoh's chariots and army strewn for over 1.5 miles at the bottom of the Reed Sea. I'm Michael Rood. Prepare for a rude awakening.
Prepare for a rude awakening with your host, Michael Rood.
This is the scroll of the first 5 books of the Bible. In Hebrew, it is called the Torah. Torah means the instructions. The Torah records that the Creator spoke directly to a man named Abraham and told him to come out of the land of the Chaldeans, also known as Babylon, which was completely immersed in pagan sun god worship. For his obedience, Abraham was promised that his offspring would inherit all of the land from the river Euphrates in modern-day Iraq to the Nile in Egypt. The name of the Torah's first book, Genesis, is Bereshit in Hebrew, meaning in the beginning. It records how Abraham's offspring came to dwell in the land of Mitzrayim, known today as Egypt. Joseph, one of the 12 sons of Yaakov, the grandson of Abraham, had 2 prophetic dreams that caused deep resentment among his brothers. Intending to kill him at first, his brothers instead sold him as a slave to Midianite merchants, who in turn sold Joseph to the Egyptians. After several years, Joseph was summoned before the throne of Egypt to interpret Pharaoh's extremely disturbing dream. Joseph's interpretation indicated that there would be 7 years of abundance in Egypt, followed by 7 years of worldwide famine. Pharaoh made Joseph prime minister in Egypt and put him in charge of acquiring and storing provisions during the years of plenty. Joseph, called Imhotep by the Egyptians, built the huge grain storage and distribution center, Saqqara. The years of abundance and famine came just as Joseph had said. And during the 7 years of famine, the wealth of the world flowed into the coffers of Egypt. Joseph was heralded as the savior of Egypt, as Imhotep was elevated to the status of a god. Joseph's father, brothers, and their families were transported by a royal caravan from their famine-stricken home in Canaan and brought into the land of Egypt, where they were given the choicest land in the empire, the land of Goshen, in the fertile Nile Delta. The second book in the Torah, Shemot, or Exodus, documents the history of the Israelites whom Joseph brought to Egypt and how they became slaves. The Torah records how the Almighty delivered them from bondage and brought them to Mount Sinai to teach them how to govern themselves according to His instructions. In the succeeding generations after Joseph, the children of Israel flourished, and the Egyptians grew afraid that they would become greater than Egypt. A new Pharaoh, unfamiliar with Joseph's accomplishments, put the Israelites under the whip of slave masters and commanded at one point that all of their male children be killed. One of those children, hidden in a basket in the Nile River, was found by a member of Egypt's royal household. He was named Moshe, which means drawn out of the water, and he was raised in the court of Pharaoh. The book of Shemot records that Moses, killed an Egyptian who struck one of the Hebrew slaves. To save his own life, Moshe fled the land of Egypt, successfully avoiding the Egyptian military patrols as he traveled the spice route to the land of Midian, the northwest corner of what is now called Saudi Arabia. Moses became a shepherd in the land of Midian, tending the flocks of Jethro, the priest of Midian. Moses eventually married Jethro's daughter Sephora and raised his family in the shadow of Mount Sinai. One day, 40 years after fleeing Egypt, Moses' attention was caught by a bush that seemed to burn endlessly without being consumed. When he turned aside to see this wonder, Yahweh spoke to Moses out of the burning bush and instructed him to return to Egypt to deliver the children of Israel from bondage. Moses was to lead Israel back to that very mountain in Midian to worship the God of their fathers. Moses returned to Egypt and requested that Pharaoh grant Israel the freedom to travel 3 days into the wilderness and do sacrifice to the God of their fathers. And they would need to take all of their flocks and possessions with them. Pharaoh owned these people. He was not going to let them out of his sight. He declared that he did not know the God of Israel. Well, a series of plagues over the next several months would change that declaration, because the God of Israel decimated the land of Egypt and exposed their pagan gods as human inventions. The final of 10 plagues killed the firstborn in the land of Egypt. Only those who followed Moshe's instructions explicitly were spared. They were to take a blemishless male lamb or goat of the first year into their homes and prepare it for 4 days. Late in the afternoon of the 14th of the month of the Aviv barley, they were to kill the lamb and apply its blood to the doorpost and lintels of their homes. After sunset, they were to eat the lamb with bitter herbs and unleavened bread. They ate the meal standing, with their coats on, their staffs in hand, and ready to leave in the early hours of the morning. About midnight, death passed over the homes of the Israelites and the Gentiles who were obedient to the instructions. But there was death in almost every Egyptian home. Early the next morning, the mixed multitude of obedient Israelites and obedient Gentiles left the land of Goshen and assembled for their journey at the city of Sukkot. Rudimentary explanation. Sukkot in Hebrew means tent or tabernacle. The city of Sukkot, or city of tents, most likely refers to the large open plain adjacent to Saqqara, Joseph's grain distribution center. Visiting merchants during the time of famine were not allowed to remain in the land of Egypt. They would have continued to camp in their